Alright, so here is to the second video. I'm going to show you a little bit about how to manipulate the program itself, the controls that you'll be using, and a little bit on the modules and how they work. In this case, here's our screen 0 module. We can run it on the local screen. If I have a server running on a different screen, maybe connect to a different computer, I'm able to broadcast to that screen something different or even the same thing. It depends on how you're going to be playing around with this. So it's pretty cool to be able to create a multi-screen sort of visualization. Won't be doing that anytime soon, but I'm going to show you a little bit about the controls. So the movement in itself, as I'm scrolling through, is going to be your left click and drag. That's one way to do it. I use this very often as it feels more intuitive to me. Another way to move is, if you consider gaming controls, your WASD, those would be your moving ones in the game. However, in VSXu, it's one to the right. So you're actually going to be using ESDF. So E's up, D's down, S is left, F is right. It controlled it in this way because you're going to use the buttons around those for certain controls as well. So I can move my screen around, kind of float around in this little area. If I zoom out, and I can zoom out with my middle mouse button, I can see the full screen. I can also zoom in and out with R and W, W out, R in, so on and so forth. So those are your basic movement controls, nothing too complex there. If you do right click, you get the basically the file menu where you can create a new project, open an existing one, save, compile to use on the VSXu player, and module browsers and bits and pieces like so. So where do we get our modules from is going to be the first question. If I double click on the screen, I get something called a module explorer. It's a little bit havoc prone. There's a lot to kind of absorb in the first usage of this. You can easily remember the locations of renderers, particle systems, mesh, math, bitmaps, macros, textures, and system, and even the sound. It's a visual tool. I like it, but I hardly use it. I still like to explore my options on the module list on the left side. These are collapsible little controls. If I double click, I open it up. If I click a opened one, I collapse it down one. So double clicking is going to be your work on those. If you want to use your module explorer, you simply find the particular module you want to work with. You click and hold, and then you drag it around the screen and let go on where you want to actually let it go, or where you want to drop it. If you want to leave the module explorer, you press the right button on your mouse, or the escape button. Nope, escape button doesn't work. Never mind on that one. So here's a module, and here's another module. Nothing too big. I'm not going to show you any visualizations yet. I'm going to show you a little bit about what these little icons mean. So first, the orientation of these modules are very direct. The left side is almost like you're writing an essay or something. You read and write from left to right in, of course, the English language or other particular Latin-based languages. So we're going to be working from the left to the right. The left is our input, so we want to put stuff into the left side, and then right would be the output, what's coming out of that module. In this case, we can see that these two are like, they're kind of empty dots. I can drag it, and if I drag, you see it's telling me where I can possibly lay it out. And if I connect it here, I'll be able to connect these two together through a wire. Now nothing is going to show up here. This mesh ribbon doesn't really give me an actual image. It gives me a 3D layout without particular textures. We'll go into that later on. So we can connect these little modules together, working through, and we'll create something in the next video. Right now I'm still showing you how to work with the controls. So get used to it a little bit, move around, get yourself flexible. This window up here is going to be your preview window. You can scale it by going to the corner, just like any window, scaling the size if you need to see better. Or you can even Control F the Control F, you'd have to click on the workspace first. You can't select the actual screen in Control F. You have to click on the workspace, and you'll know down here it says desktop local. Then I can press Control F, and I am in the full screen with a little bit of information about my current render. I can also do Alt F after I've done Control F to go into live mode. This means I can essentially play around with my modules as I see the background working, and we'll go through that and play around with that as well. It's pretty cool for live shows if you want to show your friends some cool graphics, play around, maybe, you know, at a club or something. Pretty fun to play around with. Control F will bring me out. So one of the things on the module list is actually the powerful tool, and the reason why I use it is the search feature up here. So I can actually type in rectangle, and I can get a particular module. I can click and hold and drag it out here. I'm going to get rid of this guy, and I can connect it like so, and there's our rectangle. And that's kind of a little bit on how to call out any known modules that you know. There's other ones as well. In this case, we're going to play with rectangle, so I show you a few little tricks and kind of what these pluses mean. If I do a plus, this means that there's a lot of other particular settings inside. It's almost like a package. There's a bunch of stuff inside here, and all of these have to relate with the spatial aspect of this rectangle. Click on this, I have the position, the angle, rotation axis, and the size. If I double click, I call out some controls, and I can play with these little bars to control the size and the X, Y, and Z configuration. Right now it's only a 2D image, so the Z doesn't do anything, but I can change the size. I can make it a square. Not really rectangle anymore, is it? And when I'm done, I can double click on this controller and it'll go away. Now if I've got a bunch of controllers and it's getting messy, I can right click on one of these controllers and I can do close all controllers, very useful, or Control C. So the clicking is going to be one of the main forms of communication between you and this program. Right click changes depending on where you click. Each one of these particular controls have certain abilities. I can either do a controller for a slider or a rotational axis sphere. So I can actually rotate this 3D sphere. If I had a 3D image, I'd be able to see this rotation happen. Right now, however, I have a square. And again, I can leave it with a double click. Each module has a name already pre-configured, but if you go in the top right, this little square here, you're able to rename it whatever you'd like. Just remember, you press this little rename button. And one last thing, you do have a tutor, you have a help assistant in the corner. I've kind of had her sitting in this little corner. I don't really use her Luna that much. It's okay. The documentation on here is full of holes, and you do have the ability to right click, go to, let's see, courses, and introduction course, performance mode, and macros. It's very limited. You can follow these and kind of play around and learn the basics, but when you want to actually go into some details, she's kind of useless. I'm going to tab her down to the corner. Don't really need her. And you don't really play around with much of these. These are just particular screen corrections with colors and so on and so forth. I really haven't a need to actually play with it, so nothing on this here. Now the big idea here is to be organized. I like to keep my modules in a linear based fashion so I can keep track of what's where. If you get crazy and start putting modules left and right, and this is a copy, I'm holding Control and Alt as I'm dragging and dropping. Yeah, so if I have multiple bits and pieces, you can see how the lines and the cables and all that can be a little bit confusing, especially with all the text in the area. So I like to have it in a linear motion to have a beginning to end sort of form. And that's really it for this here. I'm gonna go ahead and do an actual tutorial on some of the features that you can play around with. Very basic tutorial on the next video.